Connor's breath caught in his chest when he first saw the Ferrari. The neighborhood was far from his own side of town. Here the houses gleamed white and silver under the bright California sun, each driveway lined with new sedans, perfectly trimmed hedges, and gates that clicked shut behind visitors like polite threats. He'd only ended up here because his uncle's pickup had died halfway through a shortcut, and rather than wait for a tow, Connor decided to wander through the streets on foot, cutting blocks to save time. That was when the flash of red caught his eye, like a spark in dull concrete. He'd grown up around old trucks and rusted Chevys that wheezed their final breaths at his uncle's repair shop. He knew every rattle, every hiss, every stubborn bolt that refused to budge, until you whispered to it like an old friend. But a Ferrari, that was something different. He'd only ever seen one up close once, at a car show 2 towns over, peeking at it from behind a rope. Now there was one right here, its hood slightly cracked open like an invitation he hadn't asked for, but couldn't ignore. The garage was open too, airy and spotless, as if even dust knew better than to land here. Connor's boots left small marks on the shiny driveway. He moved carefully, listening for voices or alarms, but the street was quiet. He crouched down by the side of the car, tracing the curve of the fender with his eyes, not his fingers. He knew better than to touch something that didn't belong to him. But the hood was open, and that was enough to draw him closer, closer still, until he was leaning over to peek at the engine nestled inside like a sleeping beast. His heart drummed in his ears at the sight of the polished manifolds and clean hoses that glowed under the afternoon light. He couldn't help it. His fingers hovered at the edge, just an inch from the latch. He wanted to see if it was really loose or if he was imagining it. Maybe someone had forgotten to close it properly. He knew how these cars breathed, how temperamental their engines could be if something was even slightly out of place. He reached out, barely touching the edge, when a sharp, clipped voice struck him like a slap. "Hey, what do you think you're doing?" Connor jerked his hand back, heart slamming so hard he thought he'd faint right there on the polished driveway. The woman was storming toward him, phone still in her hand, sunglasses hiding her eyes, but not the fury blazing behind them. She looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine. Hair perfectly smooth, a white silk blouse tucked neatly into tailored pants, pointed heels clicking with every step that echoed in his brain. He opened his mouth to explain, but the words stumbled over each other like loose marbles on tile. She barked questions before he could answer. Was he trying to steal something? Did he know this was private property? Did he think she wouldn't call the cops? Connor's face burned hot with shame. He backed away, palms up, trying to form the words. "No, ma'am, I swear I didn't. I just saw the hood. It's not shut right." She cut him off with a sharp wave of her manicured hand. "Don't lie to me. I've seen your type before." Her voice dripped with disdain, every syllable perfectly shaped to make him feel small. Connor felt something sting his chest that wasn't shame anymore. He wanted to tell her how he knew cars, how he'd never steal, how he spent nights sleeping under truck beds with oil dripping on his face just to learn how engines lived. But the words stayed buried. Instead, he took another step back. The Ferrari made a strange cough then, a tiny hiccup like a spoiled child pretending to be sick. She turned, surprised. She tapped the hood with her knuckles, as if expecting it to answer her back. When it didn't, she glared at Connor again. "What did you do?" she demanded. He shook his head fast. "Nothing. I swear, Mom, but I think it's got a loose line, or maybe the intake's acting up. I've seen it before." She sneered. "Oh, so you're a mechanic now?" She laughed once, sharp and humorless. Connor didn't answer. He'd already said too much. He should have just kept walking. He should have let her Ferrari sputter and die. Maybe then she'd learn to trust the people she looked down on. But as he turned away, he heard the engine cough again, this time louder. She tried the ignition, a sputter, then silence. She cursed under her breath and slammed the door. Connor took a few steps toward the street, but his feet wouldn't move any farther. He knew he could fix it. He knew he shouldn't care, but he did. He turned around slowly. She was out of the car now, phone pressed to her ear, muttering into it. He could hear the edge of panic hiding under her polished tone. She was saying words like meeting, presentation, can't be late. He cleared his throat. She ignored him. He took another step closer. "Ma'am," he said quietly. She lowered her sunglasses just enough to pierce him with her eyes. "Please," he said, "I can fix it. Just let me look. No charge. If I can't fix it, I'll leave." Her lip curled. She looked him up and down like he was a stain she'd found on her spotless driveway. But the engine refused to start again, mocking her patience. He watched her shoulders sag, the fight in her posture slipping for a second. She hesitated, and then with a huff she snapped, "If you scratch it, I'll ruin you, you hear me?" Connor didn't laugh. He just nodded and stepped forward. He'd fixed engines older than he was, engines that coughed black smoke at him like curses. He could handle this one. He leaned in, careful not to touch the glossy paint more than he had to. He saw the problem immediately. A loose clamp near the airflow sensor. It would have killed the engine before she even reached the next block. His hands were steady now, calm and sure. He asked if she had a wrench. She rolled her eyes and gestured to the trunk. He found a small toolkit hidden under designer grocery bags and a box of brand-new shoes. He worked in silence, the street behind him quiet except for the distant hum of traffic. The woman stood nearby, arms crossed tight, phone still clutched like a weapon. He heard her sigh every now and then, muttering about time, about people who didn't know their place. Connor tuned her out, focused on the bolts, the lines, the parts that made sense when everything else didn't. When he was done, he stepped back. "Try it now," he said. She slid into the seat, pressed the button, and the Ferrari answered like a lion waking from a nap. Smooth, deep, alive. She blinked at the dashboard, then at him. For the first time, she didn't look like she was about to yell. Connor felt the corner of his mouth twitch up just a little. He wiped his hands on his jeans, careful not to smudge her driveway. She stepped out slowly, closing the car door behind her. "What's your name?" she asked, voice low now, curious where it had been cold. "Connor," he said. She nodded once. "Connor," she repeated, as if testing it on her tongue. "How old are you?" 16, he answered, bracing for her to scold him for touching something that cost more than every car he'd ever worked on put together. Instead, she reached into her bag and pulled out a slim business card, handing it to him like a truce offering. "Come to this address tomorrow," she said. "Ask for me." He took the card with dirty fingers, afraid to smudge it. "Why?" he asked, confused. She looked at the car, then back at him. "Because you shouldn't be fixing cars for free," she said. Connor didn't sleep much that night. He lay on his narrow mattress above his uncle's garage, the faint hum of crickets outside competing with the echo of that rich woman's voice replaying in his mind. He turned the business card over and over in his hands until the edges curled. Her name, embossed in gold, seemed to burn into his thoughts. He'd never held something so small that felt so heavy. He thought about how she'd looked at him after the engine roared back to life. Not with contempt, but with something like surprise, maybe even respect. By dawn, Connor was up, scrubbing the oil from under his nails, with a wire brush that bit at his skin until it turned red. He tugged on his least-torn jeans and a shirt that didn't have a garage logo on the chest. His uncle watched him from the doorway, coffee steaming in a chipped mug. "Big day?" his uncle asked, voice rough with sleep. Connor nodded. He didn't explain. The old man didn't push. He just clapped a broad hand on Connor's shoulder and muttered, "Don't let him chew you up." Connor tucked the card into his back pocket, grabbed his backpack, and stepped into the rising sun. The address led him to a building that looked nothing like his side of town. Glass and steel glinted under a pale sky. The lobby smelled like polished marble and money. Connor's boots squeaked on the floors. The receptionist raised an eyebrow when she saw him, but when he showed her the card, her posture changed instantly. She typed something on her screen, murmured into her headset, then nodded toward the elevator. Connor stepped inside, the mirrored doors reflecting a boy who suddenly looked smaller than he'd felt back in the garage, wiping grease on the hem of his shirt. When the elevator chimed open, she was waiting. She looked different in the morning light, softer somehow, without the sharp edge of fury that had cut him down in her driveway. She gestured for him to follow, heels tapping on the marble floor as they moved past glass-walled offices where men and women in suits glanced up, surprised, at the kid in battered boots walking behind their boss. She led him into a corner office larger than his uncle's entire shop. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, glinting off framed photos of luxury cars and awards lined neatly on a shelf. She turned and faced him, arms folded, the same look of curious calculation in her eyes. "Connor, right?" He nodded, suddenly unsure if he was supposed to sit or stand. She gestured to a leather chair. He sat on the edge of it, afraid he'd stain it just by breathing too hard. She circled behind her desk and leaned forward on her elbows. "Do you know why I asked you here?" she asked. Connor swallowed, his throat dry. "Because I fixed your car," he offered. She smiled, just a flicker, but it was enough to make his chest tighten with something like pride. "You didn't just fix my car," she said, voice steady. "You did what 3 different mechanics failed to do, and you did it without fancy tools, without parts, without charging me a dime. Why?" Connor blinked, searching for an answer that didn't make him sound foolish. He shrugged. "Didn't seem right to leave it broken," he said honestly. She tapped her nails on the desk. "I like people who don't walk away from problems." She picked up a tablet and slid it across to him. On the screen were photos, engines, schematics, something that looked like a design for a new prototype. Connor leaned closer, the lines and numbers pulling him in like a magnet. "We're building something new," she said. "Something different. I could hire another engineer with 3 degrees, but I'd rather have someone who understands machines like they're alive. Like you do." Connor's mouth opened, but no words came out. She continued, "It won't be easy. It'll mean long hours, dirt under your nails every day, and probably nights when you'll hate me for pushing you. But if you want it, the job's yours, apprenticeship, paid, school fees covered, training included." Connor felt his heart slam into his ribs so hard he thought she could hear it. He tried to find the trick in her offer, the catch hiding in the polished words, but her eyes were clear. She wasn't mocking him, she was serious. He forced himself to breathe. "Why me?" he asked, voice hoarse. She didn't hesitate. "Because you didn't just see a problem. You saw a solution. You cared enough to fix something that wasn't yours. That's the kind of mind that builds cars no one's ever dreamed of yet." She extended her hand across the desk. Connor stared at it for a second before wiping his palm on his jeans and taking it. Her grip was firm, no nonsense. "Welcome to the team, Connor," she said. He didn't trust himself to say thank you. He just nodded, fighting the grin that tugged at the corners of his mouth. She called someone in, a man in a crisp shirt who handed Connor a folder thicker than any book he'd ever read. "Paperwork," she explained, "a new life written in signatures and legal print." He didn't care about the fine print. He'd sign anything if it meant he could wake up every day to engines that purred at his touch. The weeks that followed were a blur of oil, metal, and long nights under humming fluorescent lights. Connor threw himself at every problem the company tossed his way. He learned words that had only been rumors to him before. Torque specs, computer diagnostics, test rigs. He asked questions until people twice his age shook their heads in disbelief. The woman, whose name he learned was Veronica Grant, watched him work from the corner of the shop floor sometimes, her sharp eyes catching mistakes before they happened, her nods of approval like gold stars he'd never gotten in school. He didn't notice how the others started to trust him too. They'd slip him extra tools when he needed them, slap him on the back when an idea worked. He stopped sleeping in his uncle's attic. They put him up in a small room above the workshop, warm and clean, with a desk where he spread out diagrams late into the night. He kept the first wrench Veronica gave him in his back pocket, like a lucky charm. He never lost the habit of wiping his hands before touching anything that wasn't metal or rubber. One evening, a problem hit the shop that no one could solve. A new engine prototype kept choking under pressure, sensors throwing errors no one could trace. Engineers gathered around it for hours, scratching heads, swearing softly, rechecking specs that didn't help. Connor waited, watching from the edge, until the hum of conversation dipped, and Veronica's eyes found his. She lifted her chin slightly, and Connor stepped forward. He leaned in, fingers tracing wires and valves, the way he used to trace the ribs of old Chevys back home. He smelled the burnt metal before he saw it, a single fuse half melted in a place no one thought to look. He pointed it out, voice calm and clear, and the room went silent as they tested his fix. When the engine roared to life, smoother than any of them expected, Connor looked up to see Veronica smiling, a real smile this time, not the polite cold curve she gave investors. He felt 10 feet tall. After everyone else drifted away, she stayed beside him, hand resting lightly on his shoulder. "You've got it," she said. "That thing you can't teach." Connor flushed under the praise, ducking his head. She squeezed his shoulder once and left him there, standing alone with the purring engine and his thoughts. Months passed, and the day came when Veronica pulled him aside, pressed a sleek envelope into his hands. "Open it," she said. Connor tore it open carefully, as if the paper might vanish if he ripped it too fast. Inside was a scholarship acceptance, stamped with the company's letterhead, and a small handwritten note in Veronica's sharp script. "You've earned it. Now go finish what you started." Connor stood there in the garage, surrounded by oil stains and the sweet scent of gasoline, a grin splitting his face so wide he thought it might break. Later, when he called his uncle to tell him, the old man didn't say much, just grunted into the phone, but Connor could hear the pride hidden behind the gruff words. That night, before he packed his bag for the university dorms, Connor slipped the old business card into his wallet. He knew he'd keep it forever, proof that sometimes life gives you a cracked hood, a rich woman's anger, and a chance to show the world who you really are.